It was a quiet Wednesday evening at the diner, the kind of night where nothing much seemed to happen. The air carried the faint smell of fried food and freshly brewed coffee, blending with the soft hum of chatter from a few regular customers. Outside, the sky was painted in shades of orange as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Inside, the waitress moved gracefully between tables, balancing trays laden with plates and cups. She wasn't thinking about anything extraordinary, just trying to get through another shift. The woman had been working at this little diner for years now, ever since life threw her curveballs she never saw coming. Her husband had walked out on her when things got tough, leaving her to figure out how to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. Every paycheck felt like a battle won, but it came at a cost: late nights, sore feet, and barely any time to breathe. Still, she showed up every day because that's what people do when they have no other choice. They push forward, one step at a time. That night, the diner wasn't particularly busy. A couple of truck drivers sat near the counter sharing stories about highways and pit stops. An elderly man sipped his tea while reading the newspaper, occasionally glancing up to watch the world pass by outside the window. And then there was a family seated at a booth close to the entrance, a dad scrolling through his phone, a mom stirring sugar into her coffee, and their young son happily playing with toy cars on the red vinyl seat. The boys' laughter rang out like music, cutting through the monotony of the evening. It reminded the waitress of simpler times before adulthood brought its weighty responsibilities. She paused for a moment to refill the boy's glass of juice, smiling down at him as he grinned back. "You're having fun, huh?" she asked, her voice warm despite the fatigue pulling at her shoulders. He nodded enthusiastically, showing her a shiny red car he'd just zoomed across the table. For a brief second, she let herself imagine what it might be like to have a carefree childhood again, to laugh without worrying about bills or broken promises. But reality quickly snapped her back. She shook her head slightly and returned to her duties, weaving between tables with practiced ease. As the hours ticked by, the atmosphere grew calmer. The storm clouds gathering outside went unnoticed by most inside the cozy diner. Lightning flashed far off in the distance, followed by a low rumble of thunder. Then, suddenly, everything changed. A loud crack echoed through the building, startling everyone. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. In the darkness, a strange smell began to fill the air, sharp and acrid, like something burning. Confusion rippled through the room. People murmured nervously, wondering if it was just a power outage or something worse. The waitress hurried toward the kitchen, her heart pounding. That's when she saw it, smoke pouring out from behind the swinging doors. Panic set in instantly. Flames licked hungrily at the walls, fueled by faulty wiring that had finally given way under the strain of the storm. Someone screamed, and chaos erupted. Customers bolted for the exits, shoving chairs aside in their haste to escape. The waitress sprang into action, grabbing a fire extinguisher from the wall and shouting instructions to anyone who would listen. "Stay calm, head for the doors," she yelled, her voice steady even though her hands trembled. She helped an older woman navigate around overturned furniture and guided a group of teenagers toward safety. But as she turned back to check the dining area, her blood ran cold. Through the thickening haze, she spotted the little boy, the same one who'd been laughing so joyfully just moments ago. He was still inside, trapped under a fallen chair near the window. His parents stood frozen near the exit, too overwhelmed by fear to move. Without stopping to think, the waitress dashed deeper into the smoke-filled room, dodging falling debris and shielding her face with her arm. Each breath burned in her lungs, but she couldn't stop, not when a child's life hung in the balance. When she reached the boy, he looked up at her with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Help me," he whimpered, coughing violently. She didn't waste a second. With all her strength, she lifted the chair off him and scooped him into her arms. The heat was unbearable, the flames roaring louder with each passing second. But she held tight, refusing to let go. Just as she reached the doorway, part of the ceiling collapsed right where they had been standing moments earlier. Stepping out into the cool night air, she collapsed onto the pavement, cradling the boy against her chest. Paramedics rushed over, wrapping them both in blankets and checking for injuries. The boys' parents ran to them, tears streaming down their faces. "Thank you," the mother sobbed, clutching her son tightly. "You saved him." The waitress waved off their gratitude, brushing soot from her face. "I was just doing my job," she said softly, though her legs felt like jelly and her mind raced with what could have happened. She had no idea that the child she'd risked her life to save wasn't just any kid. He belonged to one of the richest families in the country. All she knew was that she'd done what any one decent person would have done. Or so she thought. Little did she realize, this act of bravery would change her life forever. The morning after the fire felt surreal, like stepping into a dream where everything looked familiar but carried an unfamiliar weight. The diner was closed temporarily, its charred remains cordoned off by yellow tape as investigators combed through the wreckage. Smoke still lingered in the air, and the acrid smell clung to clothes and hair, a constant reminder of what had happened just hours before. For the waitress, sleep hadn't come easily. Her mind replayed the events over and over. The crackle of flames, the boy's terrified face, the deafening roar of collapsing wood and plaster. She kept thinking about how close she'd come to not making it out herself. When she finally dragged herself out of bed, groggy and sore, she turned on the news while brewing a cup of coffee. At first, it was just another ordinary broadcast. Weather, updates, traffic reports, the usual chatter. But then the anchor mentioned something that made her freeze mid-sip. A dramatic rescue unfolded last night at a local diner when a brave employee saved a young child from a devastating fire, the reporter said, showing grainy footage captured by someone's phone. There she was, unmistakably her, rushing out of the burning building with the boy cradled in her arms. The video wasn't clear enough to show much detail, but you could see the determination in her stance, even amid the chaos. Her heart sank a little as she realized this story wasn't going away anytime soon. She didn't want attention. All she wanted was to go back to work, serve meals, and keep moving forward. But life rarely gives people what they want. It often hands them what they need instead. As the segment continued, the tone shifted. The reporter revealed the identity of the family involved, and jaws across the country dropped. The boy she'd saved wasn't just any child. He was the son of one of the wealthiest individuals in the world. A man whose name was synonymous with innovation and success, someone who rarely gave interviews or stepped into the public eye. By noon, social media was ablaze with reactions. People praised her bravery, calling her a hero. Some shared memes comparing her to action movie stars, while others argued she deserved more than just praise. She deserved recognition, maybe even a reward. Local news stations camped outside her small apartment complex, hoping for an exclusive interview. Neighbors whispered behind their curtains, pointing at her car parked awkwardly in front of the building. It was overwhelming, to say the least. She'd spent years blending into the background, quietly doing her job, and now everyone seemed obsessed with her every move. Her boss called later that afternoon, his voice unusually serious. "Listen," he began. "You've been through a lot, and I think you should take some time off. Let things settle down before coming back." She protested weakly, insisting she needed the routine to stay grounded. But deep down, she knew he was right. Returning to the diner too soon would only invite more chaos. Reluctantly, she agreed to stay home for a few days, though the idea of sitting idle filled her with unease. That evening, as she sat alone in her tiny living room staring at the flickering TV screen, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her teenage daughter who lived with her mom during the week due to school commitments. "Mom, are you okay?" the message read. "Everyone at school is talking about you." The waitress sighed, rubbing her temples. Of course they were. News traveled fast these days, especially when it involved drama and heroics. She typed back a quick reply, assuring her daughter she was fine, but inside, she felt anything but. Over. The next couple of days, the whirlwind refused to die down. Reporters left notes tucked under her door asking for statements. Packages arrived containing gifts from strangers, flowers, chocolates, even handwritten letters thanking her for being a beacon of hope. One note, written in careful cursive, stood out among the rest. To the woman who reminded us all that kindness still exists, it read, "Thank you for your courage." Those words hit her harder than she expected. They weren't just empty compliments. They were reminders that her actions mattered, even if she couldn't fully grasp why yet. Then came the letter. It arrived via courier, sealed in an envelope thick enough to suggest importance. When she opened it, her hands shook slightly. Inside was a formal invitation, printed on heavy paper, requesting her presence at a private residence for dinner, later that week. There was no signature, just a brief note expressing gratitude for her bravery and a promise of further explanation if she chose to attend. The address listed belonged to a sprawling estate miles away from her modest neighborhood. For a moment she considered declining. What did she have to offer someone like that? She was just a waitress, a single mother scraping by paycheck to paycheck. But curiosity got the better of her. Who was this person really? And why did they care so much about meeting her? After debating with herself for hours, she decided to go, not because she wanted fame or fortune, but because she sensed there might be more to this story than met the eye. On the day of the dinner, nerves gnawed at her stomach. She dressed carefully, choosing simple clothes that wouldn't attract too much attention. As she drove toward the estate, her car rattled along winding roads lined with towering trees. When she finally pulled up to the gate, her breath caught in her throat. The mansion loomed ahead, its grandeur almost intimidating. This wasn't just wealth. It was opulence on a scale she'd only seen in movies. A staff member greeted her warmly, guiding her inside. The interior was breathtaking, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and artwork adorning the walls. Yet despite the extravagance, the atmosphere felt oddly welcoming. The owner of the house appeared moments later, his demeanor calm and genuine. He thanked her personally for saving his son's life, his voice tinged with emotion. Sitting across from him, she found herself opening up in ways she hadn't anticipated. He spoke about his own struggles, his fears as a parent, and the profound gratitude he felt toward her. In turn, she shared pieces of her own life, the hardships, the sacrifices, the dreams she'd put on hold. By the end of the evening, she realized something important. This encounter wasn't about money or status. It was about connection, about two people finding common ground in the most unexpected circumstances. As she left the mansion that night, carrying not just memories, but also a renewed sense of purpose, she understood that sometimes acts of kindness ripple outward in ways we can't predict. And hers had already begun to change lives, including her own. The days following that unforgettable dinner at the grand estate unfolded like chapters in a book, each one bringing new surprises and challenges. The waitress returned home feeling lighter somehow, as though a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. For years she'd felt stuck, trapped between bills piling up, endless shifts at the diner, and the constant worry about whether she could provide enough for her teenage daughter. But now, something inside her had shifted. Meeting the boys and father, hearing his heartfelt gratitude and realizing how much her actions meant to him, it all sparked a flicker of hope deep within her. A few days later, another envelope arrived. This time it wasn't an invitation, but rather a letter accompanied by a check. Her hands trembled as she opened it, half expecting some kind of mistake. The amount written on the check made her gasp aloud. It was more money than she'd ever seen in her life, enough to pay off her debts, fix her car, and maybe even start saving for the future. Attached to the check was a note. "For everything you've done and everything you'll do. Use this however you see fit." At first, she didn't know what to think. Accepting such generosity felt strange, almost wrong. She'd always prided herself on being self-reliant, on working hard no matter how tough things got. Wasn't taking this money just another form of charity? Yet, as she sat there staring at the check, reality began to sink in. This wasn't about pity or handouts. It was about gratitude. Someone wanted to help because they believed in her, because they saw value in what she'd done, and what she could still achieve. Slowly, hesitantly, she decided to accept it, vowing to use it wisely. With the financial burden lifted, she finally allowed herself to dream again. For so long she'd shelved her own ambitions, telling herself there wasn't time or room for them. Now, though, possibilities seemed endless. One evening, while flipping through channels, she stumbled upon a documentary about nurses working in underserved communities. Something about their stories resonated with her. The way they poured their hearts into helping others, often sacrificing their comfort for the greater good. By the time the credits rolled, tears streamed down her face. That's what I want to do, she thought. Not just serve meals, but truly make a difference. The next morning, she called the local community college to inquire about nursing programs. The advisor on the phone sounded encouraging, explaining the steps she'd need to take to enroll. There were prerequisites, exams, and applications to fill out, but none of it intimidated her. If anything, it excited her. For the first time in years, she felt like she had a purpose beyond survival. She signed up for online courses, determined to balance studying with her responsibilities at home. Her teenage daughter noticed the change immediately. "You seem happier," she said, one night over dinner. Like really happy. Word of her decision spread quickly among friends and co-workers, especially after she shared her plans during a casual conversation at the diner. Some were thrilled for her, offering words of encouragement and support. Others, however, weren't as kind. A few colleagues grew envious, whispering behind her back about how lucky she'd gotten. "She didn't earn that money," one muttered loud enough for her to hear. Another snickered. "Guess saving a rich kid pays well these days." Their comments stung, but she refused to let them bring her down. Instead, she focused on her goals, reminding herself why she'd chosen this path in the first place. Meanwhile, the boy's father kept in touch, sending occasional updates about his son's recovery and sharing tidbits about his own life. Their relationship evolved into something unexpected, a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and understanding. He admired her resilience, her ability to keep going despite overwhelming odds. In turn, she appreciated his humility, the fact that he treated her like an equal rather than someone beneath him. They exchanged messages regularly, discussing everything from their favorite books to their shared struggles as parents. One day, he invited her and her daughter to attend a charity gala hosted at his estate. At first she hesitated, unsure if she'd fit in among the glamorous crowd. But when she mentioned it to her daughter, the girl's eyes lit up. "We have to go," she exclaimed. "This is like a once-in-a-lifetime thing." Seeing her excitement, the waitress agreed. On the night of the event, they dressed up together, laughing as they fussed over hairstyles and makeup. When they arrived at the mansion, they were greeted warmly by staff members who escorted them inside. The gala was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above elegantly dressed guests mingling beneath glittering lights. Tables groaned under the weight of gourmet dishes and towering floral arrangements. Despite the opulence, the atmosphere remained inviting, thanks largely to the host himself. He introduced her to influential people, doctors, philanthropists, educators, all eager to learn more about her journey. One woman, a hospital administrator, expressed particular interest in her plans to become a nurse. "If you ever need guidance or connections," she said, handing over a business card, "don't hesitate to reach out." By the end of the evening, her head spun with ideas and opportunities. She realized that stepping outside her comfort zone wasn't just rewarding, it was transformative. For so long, she'd defined herself by her circumstances, believing she was destined to live paycheck to paycheck. Now she understood that her potential stretched far beyond those limits. With determination and support, she could build a brighter future, not just for herself but for her daughter too. As weeks turned into months, the waitress threw herself into her studies, juggling coursework with part-time shifts at the diner. Her boss, impressed by her dedication, offered flexible hours to accommodate her schedule. Co-workers who'd initially resented her newfound success began to soften, inspired by her work ethic and unwavering positivity. Even the naysayers eventually came around, acknowledging that her achievements weren't handed to her. They were earned through grit and perseverance. Through it all, she stayed grounded, never forgetting where she came from or the values that guided her. Helping others had always been second nature to her, whether it was serving coffee to tired travelers or risking her life to save a child. Now, she carried that spirit into her new chapter, driven by a desire to give back to the world in meaningful ways. Little did she know her journey was only beginning. Each step forward brought fresh challenges and triumphs, shaping her into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than she'd ever imagined possible. Time has a way of sneaking up on you when you're busy chasing dreams. For the Waitress, months flew by in a blur of late-night study sessions, early mornings at the diner, and precious moments spent with her teenage daughter. Life wasn't easy, far from it, but it felt fuller somehow, like she was finally living instead of just surviving. Every challenge she faced seemed to carry a lesson. Every small victory fueled her determination to keep going. She was no longer the same woman who had once doubted her worth. Now, she carried herself with quiet confidence, knowing that hard work and kindness could move mountains. Her nursing classes were tough, especially since she hadn't been in school for years. There were nights when she sat at the kitchen table, staring at textbooks filled with medical terms and diagrams, feeling completely overwhelmed. Her daughter would often find her there, surrounded by highlighters and sticky notes, muttering under her breath about anatomy or pharmacology. "Mom, you've got this," the girl would say, offering words of encouragement before heading off to bed. Those simple reassurances meant more than anyone realized. They reminded her why she was doing all of this. At the diner, things started changing too. Word had spread about her decision to pursue nursing, and customers began treating her differently. Some brought her books they thought might help, while others shared stories of their own struggles and triumphs. One regular, an elderly man who always ordered black coffee and toast, handed her a worn paperback one morning. "This helped me get through tough times," he said with a wink. Inside the cover, she found a handwritten note. "Believe in yourself even when it's hard. You're stronger than you think." It became one of her most treasured possessions, tucked safely inside her bag as a reminder of the support surrounding her. Despite the growing admiration from those around her, not everyone stayed kind. Online trolls discovered her story and took aim, criticizing her for accepting help from someone wealthy. Comments flooded social media platforms, some mocking her for selling out, and others accusing her of exploiting the situation for personal gain. At first, the negativity hit hard. She'd scroll through the comments late at night, wondering if maybe they were right. Did she deserve any of this? Was she letting people down by stepping into a world so different from her own? But then, something shifted. She remembered the boy's father's words during their dinner conversation. "You didn't ask for anything. You gave freely, without expecting reward. That's rare these days." Those words echoed in her mind whenever doubt crept in. She realized that focusing on critics only wasted energy better spent elsewhere. Instead, she chose to lean on the people who truly mattered, the ones cheering her on, believing in her potential and reminding her of her strength. Slowly but surely, she learned to ignore the noise and focus on what really counted. As her studies progressed, opportunities began opening doors she never knew existed. The hospital administrator she'd met at the charity gala reached out, inviting her to shadow nurses at a local clinic. On her first day, she walked into the bustling facility feeling nervous but excited. The staff welcomed her warmly, explaining procedures and answering endless questions. Watching them care for patients, listening patiently, offering comfort, finding solutions, ignited a fire within her. This was where she belonged, among people dedicated to making lives better. By the end of the day, her feet hurt from standing for hours, but her heart soared with purpose. Her connection with the boy's father deepened over time as well. Their conversations grew less formal and more personal, touching on topics ranging from parenting struggles to favorite childhood memories. He admired her tenacity, often telling her how inspiring it was to watch her transform adversity into opportunity. In turn, she appreciated his openness, realizing that wealth didn't shield him from pain or fear, They were alike in many ways, two parents fiercely protective of their children, navigating life's challenges with hope and resilience. One afternoon, he called her with an idea. "I'm setting up a scholarship fund for single parents pursuing careers in healthcare," he explained, "and I want you to be part of it, not just as a recipient but as an advocate. Your story can inspire others to believe they can achieve their dreams too." She was speechless, overwhelmed by the gesture. Helping others had always been her motivation, and now here was a chance to make an even bigger impact. Without hesitation, she agreed. The scholarship announcement drew national attention, shining a spotlight not only on her journey, but also on countless others like hers. Stories poured in from across the country. Single mothers juggling jobs and classes, fathers working double shifts to put food on the table while studying to become doctors. Each tale reinforced her belief that humanity thrived on compassion and community. Together, they formed a network of support, lifting each other up when the weight of the world felt unbearable. Through it all, her bond with her daughter strengthened. The teenager watched her mother evolve into someone braver, wiser, and more determined than ever before. Inspired by her example, she started volunteering at a local shelter, helping serve meals to families in need. "You taught me that we're supposed to give back," she told her mom one evening, "so I figured I'd start now." Years passed and the waitress's hard work paid off. She graduated top of her class, earning accolades from instructors and peers alike. On graduation day, she stood proudly alongside fellow students, her cap adorned with pins symbolizing her journey, strength, perseverance, gratitude. As she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, applause erupted from the audience. Among the cheering faces, she spotted the boy's father and his family, clapping louder than anyone else. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized how far she'd come, from serving meals at a humble diner to dedicating her life to healing others. That evening, surrounded by loved ones at a celebratory dinner, she reflected on everything that had led her to this moment. The fire, the rescue, the unexpected friendship, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle falling perfectly into place. But what struck her most was the realization that none of it would have happened without her willingness to act selflessly, to put someone else's needs above her own. Kindness, she thought, truly did ripple outward, touching lives in ways impossible to predict. Little did she know, her journey was far from over. With her nursing career just beginning, she vowed to honor the spirit of giving that had defined her path. Whether caring for patients, mentoring aspiring nurses, or advocating for underserved communities, she promised to remain steadfast in her mission. Because in the end, life wasn't about the money or fame. It was about leaving the world a little brighter than you found it. And she intended to do exactly that, one act of kindness at a time. The months following her graduation were a whirlwind of new experiences, challenges, and moments that tested her resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. Stepping into the role of a nurse wasn't just about wearing scrubs or checking vitals. It was about becoming a lifeline for people on their worst days. Her first day at the hospital felt surreal, like walking onto a movie set where every scene unfolded with urgency and emotion. The air buzzed with activity, doctors barking orders, machines beeping, families huddled together in tense silence. It was overwhelming but exhilarating, a reminder that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Her mentor, an experienced nurse named Linda, took her under her wing from day one. "You'll learn more here than any textbook can teach you," Linda said, guiding her through rounds. And she was right. Each patient came with their own story, some heartbreaking, others uplifting, all woven together by threads of vulnerability and resilience. There was the elderly woman battling cancer, clinging to hope despite the odds. The young father recovering from surgery, desperate to return home to his kids. The teenager fighting addiction, searching for redemption. Every interaction reminded her why she'd chosen this path, to make a difference no matter how small. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Long shifts left her exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Some nights she'd collapse onto her couch after work, replaying difficult conversations or moments when she felt powerless to ease someone's suffering. One evening, After losing a patient despite everyone's best efforts, she sat in her car crying, questioning whether she was cut out for this line of work. That's when her phone buzzed, a text from her daughter. "How was your day?" it read simply. She hesitated before replying, unsure how much to share. But something about the innocence of the question made her smile. "Long," she typed back, "but I'm still standing." And stand she did. With each passing week, she grew more confident, learning to balance compassion with professionalism. She discovered that being a nurse wasn't just about treating illnesses. It was about listening, holding hands, offering reassurance when words failed. She carried these lessons not only into her career, but also into her personal life. Neighbors started seeking her advice for minor health concerns, trusting her judgment. Friends confided in her during tough times, knowing she'd offer a steady presence. Slowly, she became a pillar in her community, someone people turned to when they needed strength. Her connection with the boy's father remained strong, evolving into a partnership rooted in shared values. Together, they expanded the scholarship fund, reaching even more single parents striving for better futures. They organized workshops, inviting professionals to speak about overcoming obstacles and pursuing dreams. At one event, a young mother stood up to share her gratitude, tears streaming down her face as she described how the scholarship had allowed her to finish nursing school while raising 2 children alone. Watching the audience erupt into applause, the waitress-turned-nurse felt a swell of pride, not for herself but for the collective power of kindness and determination. Still, life threw its fair share of curveballs. Critics continued to pop up online, accusing her of using her story for attention or financial gain. One viral post claimed she was exploiting tragedy for fame, sparking heated debates across social media platforms. For a brief moment, she considered responding, defending her actions against baseless accusations. But then she remembered something her mentor once told her. "You can't control what others say about you, but you can control how you react." Instead of engaging, she doubled down on her mission, pouring energy into helping others rather than wasting it on negativity. Her daughter noticed the shift too. Now in her late teens, the girl had blossomed into a compassionate young woman, inspired by her mother's example. She talked openly about wanting to pursue a career in education, hoping to create safe spaces for students facing adversity. "I want to be like you," she said one evening over dinner. "Not just because you're my mom, but because you show people they matter." The comment caught her off guard, bringing tears to her eyes. All those years of sacrifice, of pushing through exhaustion and doubt, they hadn't been in vain. She'd raised someone who understood the importance of giving back. As time went on, her reputation grew beyond local circles. A journalist reached out asking to write a feature about her journey, from saving a child's life during a fire to becoming a beacon of hope for struggling families. Initially hesitant, she agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to inspire others. The article struck a chord nationwide, resonating with readers from all walks of life. Messages poured in from strangers sharing their own stories of perseverance, thanking her for reminding them that they weren't alone. One letter stood out. "Your courage gives me the strength to keep going," it read. "Thank you for proving that ordinary people can do extraordinary things." With newfound visibility came invitations to speak at conferences and community events. Standing on stage for the first time, microphone in hand, she felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Looking out at the sea of faces, she realized she wasn't speaking just for herself anymore. She was representing everyone who dared to dream despite the odds. Her speeches focused less on her achievements and more on the idea that kindness creates ripples, touching lives in ways we may never fully understand. "It's not about being perfect," she often said. "It's about showing up, even when you're scared. It's about choosing to care, even when it's hard." Back at the hospital, colleagues began referring to her as the heart of the ward. Whether calming anxious patients, mentoring new nurses, or organizing fundraisers for medical supplies, she approached everything with unwavering dedication. Yet, she never lost sight of humility. When praised for her contributions, she'd shrug it off, saying, "I'm just doing my part." In truth, though, she knew her impact extended far beyond hospital walls. By prioritizing empathy and integrity, she inspired others to do the same, creating a ripple effect that strengthened the entire community. One particularly memorable day, a familiar face walked into the hospital, a young man accompanied by his parents. It took her a moment to recognize him, but when she did, her breath caught. It was the boy she'd saved all those years ago. He'd grown taller, his features sharper, but his smile remained the same. "We've been meaning to visit," his father said, smiling warmly. "He wanted to thank you properly." The boy stepped forward, extending a hand. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice steady, yet filled with emotion. "You saved my life." Tears welled in her eyes as she shook his hand, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. Saving him hadn't just changed his life, it had changed hers too, setting her on a path she could never have imagined. As they hugged, she whispered, "Take care of yourself, okay? The world needs more good people like you." That encounter stayed with her long after they left, reinforcing her belief in the interconnectedness of humanity. Every action, no matter how small, carried the potential to shape destinies. Hers had begun with a split-second decision to run into a burning building. Now it continued through countless acts of service, advocacy, and love. Though she didn't know what the future held, one thing was certain. She would spend the rest of her life paying it forward, ensuring that the cycle of kindness kept turning. Because in the end, that's what mattered most. Not fame or fortune, but the legacy of compassion we leave behind. Years passed, and the woman who had once been a waitress found herself reflecting on how much her life, and the lives of those around her, had changed. She wasn't the same person who had walked into that diner all those years ago, juggling endless shifts and struggling to make ends meet. Now she stood as a symbol of resilience, kindness, and the power of second chances. Her journey hadn't been easy, but it had taught her something invaluable. Every act of compassion, no matter how small, could spark a chain reaction that touched countless lives. Her nursing career flourished in ways she never imagined. What began as late-night study sessions at her kitchen table transformed into a fulfilling vocation dedicated to helping others heal, not just physically, but emotionally too. At the hospital, she became known for her ability to connect with patients, offering comfort when words failed and hope when despair threatened to take hold. Whether it was sitting beside an elderly man reminiscing about his youth or holding the hand of a frightened child during treatment, she approached each moment with genuine care. Her colleagues often joked that she had a sixth sense for knowing exactly what someone needed even before they said it aloud. But her impact extended far beyond the hospital walls. The scholarship fund she helped establish grew into a nationwide initiative, supporting hundreds of single parents pursuing careers in healthcare. Graduates of the program went on to become nurses, doctors, therapists, and advocates, carrying forward the spirit of giving back. Many credited her not only for the financial assistance but also for the inspiration she provided, a living example that dreams were possible, even against overwhelming odds. When asked about her role in their success, she always smiled humbly and said, "I didn't do anything special. I just reminded them of what they already knew. They're capable of greatness." Her daughter blossomed into a remarkable young woman, following in her mother's footsteps while forging her own path. After graduating high school, she enrolled in college to study education, driven by a desire to create safe spaces for children facing adversity. On weekends, she volunteered at community centers, teaching art classes to kids from low-income neighborhoods. Watching her daughter thrive filled her with immense pride, knowing that the values she'd worked so hard to instill, kindness, perseverance, and empathy, were being passed down to the next generation. Together, they often talked about the importance of leaving the world better than they found it, a mantra that guided both their lives. Despite her achievements, she remained grounded, refusing to let success change who she was at her core. She still visited the diner whenever she had time, catching up with old coworkers and sharing laughter over cups of coffee. Some of them teased her about her newfound fame, calling her the hero nurse. but she brushed it off with a laugh. "I'm still the same person," she'd say, "just with a fancier title." And it was true. No matter how much her circumstances changed, she stayed true to herself, prioritizing relationships and staying connected to the community that had shaped her. Not everything was perfect, though. Life continued throwing challenges her way, testing her strength and resolve. There were days when exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders, when the demands of work and family felt almost unbearable. During one particularly tough stretch, she considered scaling back her commitments, wondering if she was spreading herself too thin. But then she remembered why she did what she did, not for recognition or accolades, but because she believed in making a difference, however small. So she pushed through, leaning on her support system when needed and reminding herself that even the smallest acts of kindness mattered. The ripple effects of her actions kept surprising her. One day, while volunteering at a free clinic, she met a young woman who introduced herself as a former scholarship recipient. "You probably don't remember me," the woman began shyly, "but you changed my life." She explained how the scholarship had allowed her to finish nursing school, enabling her to provide for her son and pursue her passion for pediatric care. As they talked, tears welled in both their eyes. "Thank you," the woman said, gripping her hand tightly. "Because of you, I get to help kids every day. It's the best feeling in the world." Moments like these reinforced her belief in the interconnectedness of humanity. Every decision, every choice, carried consequences that rippled outward, touching lives in ways impossible to predict. Saving the boy during the fire hadn't just altered his destiny. It had set hers on a new course, leading her to places she'd never dreamed of. And now, through her work and advocacy, she was creating opportunities for others to rewrite their stories too. As she grew older, she began thinking more about legacy, not in terms of material wealth or accomplishments, but in the lasting impact she hoped to leave behind. She envisioned a world where people looked out for one another, where kindness became the norm rather than the exception. To that end, she started mentoring aspiring nurses, sharing not only technical skills but also lessons learned through years of experience. "Never underestimate the power of showing up," she often told them. "Sometimes, just being there is enough." On her 60th birthday, surrounded by loved ones at a cozy gathering, she took a moment to reflect on her journey. Looking around the room, she saw faces that represented different chapters of her life. The diner co-workers who had cheered her on, the scholarship recipients who had become leaders in their fields, the patients whose smiles had reminded her why she chose this path. Even the boy she'd saved, now grown and thriving, was there with his family, smiling warmly as he raised a toast in her honor. "You've done so much for so many people," he said, his voice steady yet filled with emotion, "and you'll never know how much it means to us." She shook her head slightly, brushing away tears. "No," she replied softly. "What matters isn't what I've done. It's what we've done together. We've built something beautiful, something that will keep growing long after I'm gone." In that moment, she realized her work wasn't done. Though she might slow down eventually, retiring from the fast-paced hospital environment, her mission would continue. She planned to write a book, sharing her story not to glorify herself, but to inspire others to believe in their potential. She wanted to remind readers that heroes weren't born. They were made, one courageous decision at a time. Most importantly, she hoped to convey that kindness wasn't grand gestures or dramatic rescues. It was showing up, day after day, choosing to care even when it was hard. Her final thought as the evening wound down was simple yet profound. Life wasn't about waiting for storms to pass. It was about learning to dance in the rain. Through every challenge and triumph, she had embraced the chaos, finding beauty in the struggle and purpose in the pain. And as she looked toward the future, she knew one thing for certain. Her legacy wouldn't be measured in awards or headlines, but in the countless lives she'd touched along the way, because in the end it wasn't about being extraordinary. It was about being human. And that, she decided, was more than enough.